Hi, I'd like to share a story with you today, everyone, called The Tortoise and the Hare. First of all, I want to introduce the main characters. This is Tom. Tom says, "Hi, I am the tortoise, also called a turtle." He wants you to know that he moves very slowly, but he can make sure his job is always done, whatever has to be done. And the other character is Hare. Hare says, "Hello, I am a hare, also called a rabbit." He wants you to know he's very fast, and everyone has heard how great he is. Now, in the story, it takes place in the forest. That's the setting. In the forest, there are lots of animals, trees, and plants. Okay, pay attention as we read the story. You're going to have a beginning. In the beginning, Hare tells all the animals how fast he can move, and no one could beat him in a race. Tom said he wanted to try and see. In the middle of the story, you're going to find out that Hare is winning the race, but he stops to visit with a friend, and later he stops to even take a nap. We're going to talk about the ending as we get near it in our story. Let's begin. The Tortoise and the Hare. Once upon a time, there was a hare named Hare. Hare was very fast, and he made sure that all the other forest creatures knew it. He had lots of fun running past skunks and leaping over squirrels, but most of all, Hare loved to race. He says, "I am the fastest animal in the whole forest." Hare told a group of critters, "I'm even faster than the wind. No one of you could beat me in a race." The other animals were tired of hearing Hare brag, but they were all too polite to interrupt him, all except a tortoise named Tom, that is. "Hogwash," Tom cried. "You may be fast, but you can certainly be beaten in a race." Hare laughed. He couldn't believe that one of the slowest animals he'd ever met was saying this. "Not a single creature has ever beaten me in a race, Hare." Hare replied, "But you're welcome to try." "I accept your challenge," Tom said. "I'll race you." Hare laughed, and the other creatures started to snicker. It would be a piece of cake for Hare to beat a tortoise. "We'll race next Saturday," Hare said. "That should give you plenty of time to practice." Tom spent the next few days getting ready for the race. He stretched his legs and jogged around near the lily pond. He ate lots of dandelions and berries to build up his energy. Meanwhile, Hare was so sure he'd win the race that he didn't bother to practice. He lay in the sunshine, took lots of naps, and chattered with his friends. One day, on the day of the race, the forest critters gathered at the starting line. Even though they didn't really think Tom would win, they were excited to see him try. "May the best animal win," Tom said kindly. "Good luck," Hare replied. "You're going to need it." "On your mark," said the referee. "Get set, go." Hare took off so quickly that a big gust of wind blew Tom around until he was facing backward. The crowd cheered. What an exciting start. By the time Tom was facing the right direction, Hare was long gone. Tom set off down the path at a slow and steady pace. A group of snails cheered excitedly. "Come on, Tom, you can do it," the snails yelled. Tom finally reached the first bend in the path. Hare was nowhere to be seen, but Tom wasn't worried. He put one foot in front of the other and continued down the racetrack. Far down the path, Hare was running so fast that the petals blew off the flowers as he passed. "I can't believe that silly tortoise thought he could beat me," Hare thought smugly. "I'm definitely going to win this race." Hare suddenly skipped to a stop. His friend George was lying under a shady tree, so Hare stopped to chat. "Hello, Hare," George said. "Why are you in such a hurry?" "Oh, I'm just running in a race," Hare replied, but it won't be too hard to win since I'm racing Tom. As Hare and George laughed at the idea of a tortoise racing a hare, Tom crept past quietly. The silly hares were so busy chatting, they didn't even notice him. Just as Tom thought he was safely past him, Hare laughed. Look at that tortoise go, Hare said to George. He really thinks he's going to beat me. Go get him, Hare, George said. Hare pushed past Tom, and the tortoise was blown over. When he looked up, he saw Hare disappearing down the path. That pesky hare had passed him again. Tom stood up and dusted himself off. He took a step and then another and continued on his way. Hare was having lots of fun racing Tom. The tortoise was far behind him, and Hare was certain he would be the winner. Hare did a somersault and then a cartwheel. He sure liked to show off. Up ahead, a crowd of animals was waiting at the finish line. As Hare neared the finish line, he heard the animals cheering. He slowed down the trot to a slow pace. What's the hurry? Hare thought to himself. That tortoise is so far behind, he'll never catch up. Sure that he would win, Hare decided to stop and rest for a while. He hopped off the path and into the meadow beside it. I'll just take a quick nap, he thought to himself. There's plenty of time to relax. With that, Hare lay down in the soft green grass and fell asleep. When Tom finally reached the sleeping hare, he wondered why Hare was napping. That's no way to win a race. Tom tiptoed past him very carefully and very quietly. Hare snorted, but he didn't wake up. The crowd at the finish line started yelling and clapping when they saw Tom. Even though some of them had doubted him, it looked like the tortoise was going to win the race. Tom, Tom, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can, the crowd cheered. The crowd cheered so loudly that they woke up Harold. He looked around and was surprised to see Tom nearing the finish line. The hare laughed to himself as he hopped to his feet. That silly tortoise still thought he'd win the race. Harold sped off down the track, sure that he would catch up to Tom, but he had an awful long way to go. Harold suddenly felt very worried. He really shouldn't have stopped to chat with George or take a nap. What a waste of time. Come on, Tom, the crowd cheered. You're almost there. Tom stretched out his long neck and poked his head over the finish line. Just as Harold caught up to him, Tom won the race. That was a great race, Tom said to the hare. No hard feelings. You beat me fair and square, Harold admitted. I may be fast, but I'm not always very wise. Slow and steady beats hurried and careless. From that day forward, Harold worked hard at everything he did. The tortoise and the hare became great friends and lived happily ever after. So if you figured it out, at the end of the story, the winner was not the hare, but it was the tortoise, because he believed he could never give up. He believed in himself, and he finished the race, and he stayed in it. So the hare was faster, but he wasn't smarter. Thank you for listening, boys and girls.